There's no bell, I guess, to start in school, so we'll begin. And as usual, we'll begin with prayer. So if we could put ourselves in a state of grace. But we get in the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. May the glory and the promise of this joyous time of year bring peace and happiness to you and those you hold most dear. And may Christ, our risen Savior, always be there by your side to bless you most abundantly and be your loving guide. Amen.
Amen.
Holy Spirit. Amen. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good morning so far?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, awesome. Well, welcome. My name is Phil Dre, and I am an assistant professor at Mount Mercy University in the Religious Studies department, and I'll be part of the breakout session with you this morning with
Mike Goldsmith. I'm a teacher here at Xavier, and I've been here since this was a cornfield, so from the beginning. Prior to that, I taught at Regis High School. And I am a social studies teacher. However, for 10 years, I had the privilege of co-teaching an apologetics course called Why Am I Catholic with Dr. Dre.
This is our, fifth men's conference?
5 or 6.
Five or
Yeah,
six.
something like that.
We're doing a breakout session, so we're very pleased that they asked us back. And when Mike and I were asked to do this session, we discussed what do we want to do, because we try to do something a little bit different every year. With the men's conference a little bit later this year than normal. Usually I think it's before Easter, but it was after Easter, and so naturally it seemed resurrection might be a good theme for our breakout session. So this is our theme: believing in the resurrection of Jesus Christ. We're going to look at resurrection from possibly and hopefully from a little bit different. A couple of different angles and get you to discuss. This isn't a lecture by any means, so we'll look to you to talk to each other and talk to us as well. So our goals, we're going to look at possible explanations for the resurrection. Okay, and that should alert you. It's not just going to be looking at resurrection from what we read in the four Gospels. We're going to look at it from a little bit different, some different explanations, and we'll get into that a little bit more. We'll look briefly at the appearances of Jesus after the resurrection, and then also we'll look at what some early biblical accounts outside of the Bible. Okay, so extra biblical accounts. What do they tell us of this community of believers after the resurrection? Does that help us with our belief in that particular event? So we got about 40 minutes to do a lot, so we'll see what we can do with this. Okay, so this is a rhetorical question, but just to set this up for you, so it's something for you to start thinking about. Apart from faith, because resurrection is the answer to that is I believe in it. Okay, it is a very faith-filled question, but apart from that, is there a logical, reasonable reason to believe in resurrection? Okay, so someone who doesn't have a Christian background, someone who doesn't have faith, could we explain resurrection to them and make them and have them think, "Wow, that's reasonable. There's a logic to that." But think about it. We're trying to ask them to think about the rising of the dead, and that's reasonable. That's logical. Okay, so it's going to be a little bit different than just saying we believe in it. Okay, is there something more than just belief that we can use to explain the resurrection? Okay?
All right, so we are going to pattern much of this after a guy named Peter Kreeft. You may be familiar with Dr. Kreeft. He's a philosophy professor at Boston College. He writes some absolutely brilliant stuff. And there's nothing better than having an active faith life. So again, as Dr. Dre said, for the next 40 minutes, we want you to ignore that faith life. And we just want you to look at historical, logical, rational thinking. And then if we can take all that and supplement it and add it to our faith life, I think our belief in resurrection is just going to be all that much better. This is straight from his website. He loves his 5 grandkids, 4 children, 1 wife, 1 cat, and 1 God. All right. He's written over 75 books on various topics, and I believe some of them possibly on the resurrection. So again, here is what he does. He looks at this from a logical perspective and says, okay, so what theories do we have surrounding the resurrection. We have one that Christians like. It's that Jesus rose from the dead. We're going to call it the Christianity theory. If we look at other possible theories from a logical perspective, what would we come up with? And we'd come up with something like this. Okay, the top one we're big fans of. But what if Jesus actually didn't rise and they only thought they saw the risen Christ? They didn't really see what they saw. We call it the hallucination theory. In other words, they thought they saw it, but they really didn't. What if Jesus died and he didn't rise, but actually the gospel stories are myth? That's where we get most of our information about the risen Christ. What if it's a myth? What if it was never meant to be taken literally as nonfiction? What if it's part symbolism, part truth, part legend? What if the whole thing, what if the gospel stories are kind of a myth? Okay? That would obviously cast a different light on the resurrection. Or what if the gospel writers themselves, what if the Fab Four, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they made it up? It's a common theory. Might be on your local college campus. I'm not sure. What if they just made this up and their intent was to deceive us? Okay? The greatest deception of all time. The greatest fantasy story of all time. Conspiracy theory. And then the last one, what if Jesus actually never really died? What if he faked his death as kind of a joke on the world, and we're going to call it the swoon theory. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do, I'm going to turn the lights on in just a minute. I'm going to give you this handout, and I've got all four of these theories listed right here. I simply want you, and please discuss with the person sitting next to you, I want you to poke holes in these theories. Whatever might cast doubt upon these theories, whatever you might use as statements of fact to refute these theories or statements of logic, I want you to take about 5 minutes and fill in the squares for us. Okay? We're going to get you going right away. So let me pass this out.
This is mine.
That is the answer key. If you need a pen, there's one right there. Come on, teacher. Give you that, and it's a really short presentation. Any pens?
Thank you.
I got enough. Yeah, feel free to talk to people sitting near you. How would you poke holes in these theories?
His mother was there. I think my ex was there. So I'm just saying they weren't alone. Somebody had to keep these 12 guys.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, somebody had to be doing somebody, exactly. You guys were home.
Can I save your notes?
No.
I memorized it.
Oh, you didn't say your high school notes, I'm guessing.
I memorized all the ones.
It's going to be my go-to.
You should have let them walk us back in the room and they left.
Yeah.
I don't understand the second one. The second one. So what they're saying is. They made it all up.
Yeah.
This one for sure. Why would they die for it?
Nonsense.
No, because then why would they die for it?
Yeah, somebody just died for it. That's true.
No, three. No. Oh, brother, no. Mine's easy enough.
There's something with the
You guys.
I've no idea. I'd have to look at that. They didn't have to get lightly on him. If it gets to him, then.
Yeah.
Up to their time, martyred. think he faked it? No. Why do you think he would fake it for?
I always found it's really interesting.
Across the two guys sitting next to you. Your mother wants you put down on the ground.
Somebody else is across and then sticks his shoulder.
And they like doing that. And they like doing that. That's the way they killed people back in those days. They didn't hang you. They didn't put you on the cross. Everybody see it.
With all the witnesses,
Too many witnesses.
they stabbed him on the side.
Yeah.
Even if he somehow survived all of that, he would not be up and walking around 3 days later with stabbed off.
It's not just, yeah, right, it's not just that, but look at the beating he took before he could take the cross.
Scourging.
They beat the shit right out of him. This guy was bleeding from head to toe.
Yeah. There's no way.
And like you said, how would he get from one way to the other?
3 days later, being able to just.
Especially after saying, when he fell, he fell, how many, you know, he said, he fell a lot.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say no again, there's a lot of no's in this.
Maybe another minute to wrap up your thoughts? Maybe we'll take those wrap up thoughts. The final?
Next week.
We got this. I'm not ready for Claire to go home. She eats a lot.
Okay.
Okay, so let's take these one at a time. What's the problem with the hallucination theory? The idea that the apostles really thought they saw a risen Christ, but they didn't. Anybody got a problem with that theory? What's wrong with that? So on.
How could 12 people, maybe more people in that room, hallucinate the
Mhm.
same thing?
That'd be a challenge.
That's good peyote, but is what that
That
is.
Any other problems? Like what?
He asked for food to eat, they ate it in front of them.
You did. Yeah, hallucinations don't really eat things. You don't touch them. Okay? Now, if I break down the Kreeft article, here's some of the prominent reasons that he gives. Basically, there's so many witnesses, you can't fool all of them. Hallucinations, from a scientific perspective, they last for a few seconds, for a few minutes. They don't last for 40 days. Hallucinations, from a scientific perspective, they usually only happen once, but by golly, we were hallucinating the same guy again and again, especially from the apostles' perspective. They saw him many, many times after he was resurrected. Okay? This is a common theme we could put almost anywhere. There's just too many people to fool. There's too many people out there who had access to this information in this society, and you're going to fool them all? Not likely. Not likely at all. Let's move on. How about the myth theory? So this whole idea that the Gospels really are meant to be taken as nonfiction and that they're supposed to be part legend, I think this is a common interpretation in different literary circles, that they're just kind of like Aesop's fables. They have some good lessons in them, but don't file them in your nonfiction section. What's the problem with that? Potential problem with that theory? Who's got ideas?
A lot of people died defending it.
They did. They did. People don't generally die from myths. What else? Yeah.
They're the link, a couple of things. I mean, they're often tied to historical events, and the language in the scripture doesn't seem to allow for that sort of symbolism.
That's not something people usually focus on. When you read scripture, especially the Gospels, they're written in such a detailed, sober manner. There's nothing fantastical about them. There's nothing that says, oh, we're here to build this legend or this myth. They're not written like mythology or Greek gods. Yeah.
There are historical documents, other people, non-Christians, talking about a lot of crucifixion, and they mention him by name.
And you came to the right place because we're going to read those historical documents in about 15 minutes. Wow, I didn't even plant this guy here today. He came of his own free will. Fantastic. Okay, so let's look at some of the problems with the myth theory here. Just, you pointed out, the way the Gospels are written, we can compare them to other ancient writings, to ancient Greek mythology. They do not line up. They are written almost like a historian would write. Careful attention to detail, careful attention to geography. And by the way, we've looked at all these details and facts, and we have yet to find an inconsistency. Think about that for a minute. The most scrutinized book in the history of the world, and we haven't really found the fault with it yet when so many people want to. That's compelling to me. The whole idea of a myth, the Gospels are written somewhere between 20 to 50 years after the death of Jesus, and this is just an oral culture that memorizes things, that memorizes the entire Old Testament. It's not enough time for myth to develop. We're going to hit on this fact again a little bit later, but it's very significant that women hold a prominent place in Scripture. If you're true to form and how you write in the ancient world, you don't mention women. They do not rise up to that level, okay? But yet women are featured very prominently in the Gospels. This was pointed out also as well. So it's hard to write this off as a myth. How about a conspiracy? This one would be very popular, I think. That literally the story is made up. There's not enough evidence. We don't really know. Perhaps the apostles just pulled off the greatest hoax in history. What's the problem with our conspiracy theory? Yeah.
What's the motivation? All the disciples died that were killed, right? So what's the motivation to come up with this conspiracy?
Maybe you and me and two of our friends, we get together, we pull off this great, great joke, and if it goes really, really well, we get tortured and killed. Doesn't human nature have to kick in here a little bit? I love that. Come on. What else? What's the problem with our conspiracy theory? That they just made it up.
There's too many non-biblical references to it and accounts.
We can cross-check this. One of the books we assign in class, if you take all the ancient manuscripts from all the ancient languages just of the Gospels, and some are just a small passage, others are extended passages, I think it's in the neighborhood of 20,000 of them. Wow, that's some cross-checking right there. Okay, we can do that. What are some big problems with our conspiracy theory? You mentioned there's no motivation. They're going to die. They're living in a Roman society. They're going to be killed, crucified if they do this. The apostles themselves, we see no evidence of them having character issues. They're human, definitely human, but they also love their friend dearly, and we see them being of high character overall. This was interesting to me that Kreeft pulls this off. What are the odds that these fishermen and tax collectors really wrote the greatest literary adventure of all kind, which put Shakespeare to shame? Okay, there's that. This one to me is the most compelling. We find no evidence, we find no writings from the ancient world saying this is a bold-faced lie. If they make these claims, and they're out there, and people know they're making these claims, if they're flat-out lies, wouldn't somebody write it down? Wouldn't some people scream to heaven? These guys are just totally off base. Yet not only do we not find this, we see thousands and thousands of people in these societies converting to Christianity. What in the world in our human nature makes us do that? We're just not sure. Okay? You brought up this point earlier. Here's the fate of some of the apostles. Many of them crucified. They tried to kill John. He wouldn't fall for it, so they exiled him to Patmos. James, his brother of John, was beheaded. Thomas killed, James stoned to death, and Paul beheaded. That's your reward. That's your reward for spreading the good news. Now the swoon theory. All right. Dr. Dre's going to run you through the swoon theory, but just what's the problem with saying that Jesus didn't really die? He's got some problems. Go ahead.
Well, he reappeared and he still retained his wounds.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Good.
the figment that he went through.
Okay, good. What else is hard to take with this?
There's no account for Jesus during the days he was in the tomb.
Mm-hmm. Good. Anything else out there? What do you think?
Well, when somebody is stabbed, their blood spurts out if they're alive, but his poured out because he was already dead.
Yes, blood and water came up. All right. Okay, so Dr. Dre is going to run you through not just what Kreeft might say about this, but we feel it's important, not just for our exercise, but for us as Christian men to appreciate what Christ did for us. And so we're going to run through from a medical and historical perspective what a Roman crucifixion was like. Okay?
All right, thank you. All right, so as I'm going through this, the question to keep asking yourself is, could you have survived this? Okay? The swoon theory is all about Jesus fainting on the cross, and then being buried, and then reviving in the tomb, and then showing up. Okay? So, given everything that we know about crucifixion, also about scourging, we have to go back to scourging as well, because that's part of the passion. Is that even feasible? Would that be possible? Okay? I'll apologize ahead of time. There's no way to make crucifixion a fun, flowery discussion. Okay? It just isn't possible. Same thing with scourging. Okay? So we'll go through it a little bit, but it's hard to crack any jokes during crucifixion talk. Okay? That's just the manner of the material. So what we'll do is we'll start back actually on Holy Thursday night, because this sets up the passion. And you all know the story. Jesus has Last Supper, eats with his apostles, goes out to Mount of Olives, right? And he starts praying. Okay, Luke's gospel is the one that mentions Jesus sweating blood. Do you remember that little point? Okay, medically, what is going on is what is called hematidrosis. Okay, you can sweat blood. Okay, it's possible. You can't do it here. Okay, you just can't sit there and think, I'm gonna sweat blood and make yourself do it. That's not the way it works. The only time you sweat blood is if you're under really extreme blood pressure. You know that you're gonna die. Okay, someone literally has a gun to your head and you know they're gonna pull the trigger. Okay, that's pressure. Okay, what happens is that the capillaries in your skin, they burst because of the pressure that your body's under. So they just spontaneously burst. And the blood pools in sweat glands. And so so you have blood coming out of your sweat glands, you're sweating blood. Okay, and it's not like, Iowa, mid-July, when you go outside in 100-degree humidity and all that, it's not like you're just sweating. Okay, it's not a lot of blood. Okay, but there is some there. The other thing it does is it puts your body in what is called a hypersensitive state. So anything that happens to you is far worse. So like a slap is like a punch. Okay, so kind of think about that. You have the passion, you have the scourging, you have the crucifixion. That's painful enough. But this makes it even worse than that. Okay, so we have this setup for what's going to occur a little bit later. All right, so scourging. And we're not going to go through the whole passion. We're just going to focus on the events of the punishment more than anything else. So the scourging, this is a typical whip used by the Romans at that time. So what you'll notice probably right away is there's actually 3 whips within one whip. So every time Jesus was whipped, it would be like 3 whips coming at him and not just one. Okay? And in each of the whips, on these slides you only have iron balls, but I think on this one you can see this one's a little bit different. You have the metal balls, but you also have bits of, sometimes it's bone, sometimes it's glass as well being tied into this whip. And so each time that Jesus is whipped, something happens. The leather cuts, so it's like getting a paper cut. And we've all had paper cuts before, and if you get it bad enough, it kind of can bring you to tears, right? But imagine the paper cut being about 1 foot long. How much would that hurt? Just that, you'd be like, okay, the metal balls bruise. Okay, we've all had bruises before, we know what that means. Okay, what really gets you is the bone or the glass. Because when the whip hits the body, the glass or bone attaches to your body. And then when the whip is retracted, the bone or the glass comes with it, but what also comes with it? Parts of you, right? So flesh, muscle, tendon, all that kind of stuff. Okay, scourging ranges between 30 to 40 lashings. Okay, it's not a capital punishment. Okay, the soldiers could not kill Jesus. Okay, the crucifixion is a capital punishment. Okay, but scourging, after 30, let's go to the minimum, after 30 lashings of this, what would your body be like?
Wrong.
Yeah, okay. A lot of times people die from this. Okay, afterwards. Okay, but the soldiers, if you're tied up, the soldiers cannot kill you here. But afterwards, that's when you would die. Okay, so think about that. Swoon theory. Is there a way that Jesus could have faded from this, as well as crucifixion, and then come back? What kind of shape would he be in? Okay, all right. Crown of thorns, we have that as well. Post-scourging. And the carrying of the cross. We get into the crucifixion part now. Now, the carrying of the cross, the beam is, a lot of times in our pictures, we have Jesus carrying the entire cross. Probably not so. And most of the times when the Romans crucified people, the vertical beam was already up on Golgotha. It saved them time. Okay, so the only thing that you carry would be the horizontal beam, but that's 75 to 125 pounds on shoulders that have just been scourged. Okay, so he's walking, and this isn't biblical, but we have it in our Stations of the Cross. What happens with Jesus as he's walking with the cross? 3 times. He falls down, right? Doctors have looked at this, and they think it's more than just stumbling. What they think is happening is that he's fainting. When we think about the wounds that he has, the loss of blood, the heart rate, all that kind of stuff, they think his body just goes into shock. And then he faints, the soldiers revive him, he walks a little bit more, faints, he does that 3 times, and ultimately what happens? They take the cross away, right? And they pull Simon out of the crowd and say, okay, now you got to carry it, because he's dying. So they got to get him up to be crucified before he dies. All right, so crucifixion. Once you get up to Golgotha, very quick. The Romans can crucify somebody in like 5 minutes. It's a very, very quick process. Okay, so the first thing the soldiers do is, you can kind of feel it. In your wrist where it bends, if you press hard enough, you can find a little divot. Okay, what the soldiers are looking for is where the 2 bones in your arm come together, and they want the nail to go right in that place. Okay, probably not in the hand. Again, a lot of pictures that we have of crucifixion, Jesus, it's the nail in the hand, right? It's probably going to be in the wrist more, because the hand isn't going to carry the weight. Okay, recent research, depending on how much you weigh, maybe through the fatty part of your thumb, right here, they think it could carry the weight of someone crucified. I have no idea how they tested it. I don't want to know how they test that theory. Right? But more than often, it's going to be right here in the wrist. Okay, so you lay it on the ground. The soldiers find that point, and this is a pretty good drawing of it. The nail goes right through that point. And what happens is the nail destroys all the nerves basically going to your hand. So your hand looks like this. You can't move it. Okay, Jesus isn't on the cross, waving, Mary comes by, hey, Mom. Nothing like that. It's paralyzed. He can't move it. Okay, so one arm, the other arm, gets him on the cross. The foot comes next then. Same situation. This is actually a crucified foot. Okay, but if you notice, it's kind of interesting what the Romans do here. Normally, the nail comes right here, right to the top of your foot. But on this one, they're going through the side. Okay, so kind of imagine that. It's through the side of your ankle. We have no idea why they did it this way. Okay, maybe they were just bored. I don't know. But that's a crucified ankle. Okay, so you're crucified. That's it. That's it. Okay, so we got Jesus being scourged. We got this. Okay, how do you die from crucifixion? Some of you might probably know. How do you die? You suffocate, right? Okay, because when you're on the cross, the gravity is pulling your body down and away from the cross. And so your lungs are locked in an inhale position. Okay, you can't exhale. So the way you exhale is you push up on the nail, you rotate on the nails in your wrist, exhale, fall back down. Push back up, exhale, fall back down. And you can do that. If you're in pretty good shape, you can probably be on the cross for a couple days. Because that's what the Romans wanted. You were crucified along roads. And so people can walk by, look up at you and say, what'd you do wrong? And you could push up, talk to them, and then fall back down and tell them. Okay? Think about what Jesus said on the cross. Was it long speeches? No, really, really short statements, right? Why? Because when we talk, we exhale. So for Jesus to talk, he had to push up, rotate, exhale, fall back down. How painful would that be? Okay? So, we have Jesus being scourged, we have Jesus being crucified. As I mentioned, a lot of this material comes from doctors, okay, especially from the Mayo Clinic. And what they reason is, given all of their experience, and Mayo Clinic is a pretty good hospital, I think. Okay? What these doctors reason is that, looking at what happens after scourging, what happens during crucifixion, what they think happens is that Jesus either has a massive heart attack, okay, or his heart literally bursts in his chest. And so there's no way, from these doctors' perspectives, there's no way that he could have survived scourging and crucifixion at all. But what's the swoon theory based upon? He fainted. And then he's taken down, and then he revives in the tomb 3 days later. What do you think? That's a tough sell, isn't it? That's a very tough sell. Okay? And, we forgot. Spear through the chest, right?
Yeah.
He has to overcome that as well. Just from fainting. That's tough. That's a tough one. All right, so swoon theory. Let me throw this up here. All right. Is there any way that he survived? No. There's absolutely no way that he could have fainted and survived or anything like that. Even the story points to the death. The soldiers didn't break. They broke the legs of the two men crucified with him, right? Why?
They couldn't breathe.
So they couldn't breathe. If you have broken legs, you can't push up, so you're going to suffocate. Okay, they didn't do that to Jesus because he was already dead. Again, these are soldiers. They crucify people all the time. That's their job. Is there any way they're going to mistake somebody who fainted for somebody who died? No, not at all. That's why, and then the spear goes through. Okay, so there's no way. We got the blood and water, I think was mentioned before. Okay, we put Jesus in the tomb. Okay, he's been scourged on Friday. He was crucified, fainted, woke up in the tomb on Sunday. So that means he'd have to roll the stone, because it's a rolling stone tomb. Okay, the stone is probably about as tall as the screen, probably as wide. So he had to get up, roll that stone, overpower the guards that are there, and then go to see his apostles. What do you think about that? No way, right? There's absolutely no way. Okay, but let's say he does that. Okay, somehow he does it. When he gets to the apostles, what's he going to look like? We forget about that, right?
His clothes would be all gone anyway, too.
Well, I mean, he'd be a mess, right? I mean, think about the wounds in his back, all that kind of stuff. And think about what belief was the Christian church based upon? The resurrection of Jesus, right? Glorified body, all that kind of stuff. If he showed up this way, would any of the apostles be like, "Wow, you just rose from the dead. You look great, Jesus"? No, there's no way at all. Okay, so yeah.
But my only question, not to interrupt you, Alan, but
No, you're
my
fine.
only question is what biblical in the Bible and that they said that they before they buried him, they actually cleaned him up and put good cloth over and put
Yep.
perfume oils in there with them so
Yep.
the rotting smell wouldn't come. But I'm just saying, just out of myth,
Yep.
now, he would maybe the blood. I don't know. You're probably bleeding like crazy, but I mean,
It's a good
would the
point.
blood dry up
Yeah.
and we clean them up and there, wiping them all off? Because he wouldn't feel it; he'd be completely out of it.
You got some? Go.
But if he was still alive, he'd still be bleeding. So even though they cleaned him up, he still would be a bloody mess.
Yeah. And then you also throw in, okay, this is Friday.
Yeah.
The reason they took him down was because Sabbath was going to start Friday night, so it's only a couple hour window. So how much could they do? And then you have the women coming on Sunday in order to continue the process. So
Yes.
he's not even let's go with it. How much could they have done? Probably not a lot. because they have to get him down, they have to, I mean, plus all the grief going on and all that, it's not like they're gonna be working, you know, like a team and knowing, you know, and all this, so he's still gonna be, even if that's possible, he's still gonna be looking pretty bad, and plus he still has to get out of the tomb.
Two, yeah, I agree with there, yeah.
You know, and what kind of state is he gonna, so, I get it, okay, let's assume this is right, but there's.
Let's just say they cleaned him up.
Okay.
You know, he
Yep.
did get out of the tomb.
Yep.
You know, he did meet the apostles. Even then, in that point, he's gonna have scars
Oh my gosh,
and ripped
yeah.
open his arms, his chest, his legs.
How painful would it be to, after lying 3 days, how painful would it be to take off the bandages? I mean, that's it. You know, it just, the
Even-
logic of it is like, oh my gosh, he's real, if that's true, you know, again, going back to the conspiracy theory, let's say Jesus was part of it. I mean, I don't, there's nobody in the history of the world who was so committed to a lie to go through all, just the pain of that. I mean, that's extraordinary.
Well, even according to the Bible too, when they walked him up to crucify him, they ripped his clothes off, and
Yeah.
they said they were peeling skin right off with him
Yeah.
that stuck to him.
Yeah, yeah.
From healing.
The doctors from the Mayo Clinic, after their scourging, they put a robe on Jesus.
Right.
Remember that? Okay. And they punched him and all that kind of stuff. The doctors in the Mayo Clinic said that when the robe was taken off, it'd be like having 1,000 Band-Aids being ripped off your body at the same time. I mean, it's like being scourged all over again, essentially. You know, so you would have that again. I mean, that's if the conspiracy theory, if the swoon theory is accurate, Jesus had to be really committed to this lie. Again, for what purpose? So, yeah.
And I've heard that when a body's hanging like that, they dislocate their shoulders
Yep.
and elbows and
Yep.
wrists,
Yep.
make them 9 inches longer than they were before.
Yeah, yeah. Again, the logic of it just doesn't make sense. So, what theory?
He must have exhausted most of his blood supply by the time, you know, they were nailing him down.
You would think, yeah, yeah. And there was no way of getting new blood
Yeah.
at that time. So what's the best theory? I mean, these are the most logical ones. What's the best theory?
To me, it's, truth lives on, untruth does not.
Mhm.
If any of those others others are all theories, they're untrue. Christianity would have died a long time ago.
Yeah, yeah.
But if it's truth, it lives, and Christianity lives.
Mhm. So the Christian theory, and we don't need to go through that, we know that pretty well. Okay? The Christian theory, resurrection, is based upon these eyewitness accounts, right? That we talked, Mike took you through before already. The women are important. Women are the first ones there. At that time, women were completely unreliable as witnesses. Women could not be taken seriously in court, so they were never called as eyewitnesses in court. Only men were called as eyewitnesses, because women make things up. You can't trust them. Okay. But who were the first people to show up? Women. Women. Again, if the gospel writers wanted to make this believable, men would have been the first. If that's culturally what would have happened, why would they do this unless it actually was the sequence? And then we have Peter, a whole bunch of apostles, and you went through, you talked about how the hallucination, the physicalness of Jesus' body, a little bit, not a ghost, it's more than that. He ate with them, that was mentioned before. Okay, and we have this, 1 Corinthians, this is a letter by Paul. New Testament scholars think this was probably written, 1 Corinthians, probably in the 50s, so about 20 years after the death and resurrection of Jesus. But scholars point to this, because this is Paul's creedal statement. This is basic Christianity. And scholars would say this even goes back to probably 32, 33 AD. This is something that Paul was probably taught at his conversion. Because it's basic Christianity. And what's the center part of it? Resurrection and appearances, right? And Paul even, and this is a challenge that Paul's putting out. It's like, I'm not making this stuff up. If you wanna talk to people, there's people around you who've seen Jesus. Don't take my word for it, take 500 people's word for it. So again, those appearances are very important. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much. The Creek article is just magnificent. I put the link on the first page there. We've given an abbreviated form of it. He has probably twice as many reasons that we list up here to go along with the illogical perspective of some of these theories. Okay? Now, the last thing we're going to look at is basically what information about Christianity and about Jesus exists outside of the Bible. Now, we're probably going to run out of time here, which is fine. You guys need something to do for lunch. You've got all these, extra biblical sources here. We've got 5 sources. One is from a Jewish historian. One is from a Jewish book, the Talmud. One is from a Roman government official. One is from a Roman historian. One is from a Greek writer. None of them are Christians. None of them have the slightest incentive to promote Christianity at all. But yet, just from the history that they wrote down, we pick up valuable information about what people believe about Jesus and what the early Christians believed and did. So, I'm just going to walk through one of them, and then I'll let you kind of look at the rest of them. But if you go to number 1, right there, this is written by Tacitus, Roman historian. This is where I get to put my history teacher lens on. And he says, and I quote from 115 AD, amazingly close to the source from a historical perspective, Nero fastened the guilt and inflicted the most exquisite tortures on a class hated for their abominations, called Christians by the populace. Christus, from whom the name had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of our procurators, Pontius Pilate, and the most mischievous superstition, thus checked for the moment, again broke out not only in Judea, the first source of the evil, but even in Rome. Okay, so what does our Roman friend tell us about Jesus and Christianity? Just from that one short passage, he tells us Christians were tortured. He tells us that the faith was named after a guy called Christ. He tells us that he suffered this fate at the hand of Pontius Pilate. Be a good thing to put in a creed, wouldn't it? He tells us that this mischievous superstition, love the terminology, your mischievous superstition is my Christianity. And where did it break out? He said it's breaking out in Judea, and it is breaking out in Rome. Bishop Barron loves to call Rome the belly of the beast when he's talking about Christ. What Christian would want to practice that faith there, in Rome? But from this one passage, we get all of this about Christians. All right, there are 4 more passages, which I'm just going to invite you to look through. But I've highlighted something. Let me give you just a quick rundown of what we get about early Christians and Christ, just from these 5 passages. It tells us that they knew they were going to be executed, they knew they would be punished, and they refused to recant their Christianity. It says, I like this quote, they met regularly before dawn on a fixed day to chant verses alternately amongst themselves in honor of Christ as if to a God. What's that sound like? Sounds like morning mass, doesn't it? They're going to church. It says they abstained from theft, robbery, and adultery. What are they following?
10
Commandments. They're following the 10 Commandments. This is from 111 AD. And this guy says, I found nothing but a degenerate sort of cult carried to extravagant lengths. These crazy Christians are serious about what they do. Then I go to the next passage, and it says, Jesus wrought surprising feats. He won over many Jews and many of the Greeks. They condemned him to be crucified. And these Christians, so called after him, have still not disappeared. They're still doing their thing. The next one, it says, during the Passover season, it's timely, during the Passover season, Jesus was hanged. And he is going forth to be stoned because he practiced sorcery and enticed Israel to apostasy. Apostasy means to leave your teachings, especially religious teachings. So it means that Jews are leaving the faith and they're going to Christianity. And it also means that Jesus is accused of practicing sorcery. I don't know, your sorcery might be my miracle. I'm just throwing that out there as a possibility. And the last one, it says the Christians, worship a man to this day. They were crucified on his account. They have, I love the language here, they have a general conviction, these Christians, that they are immortal. It explains their contempt of death. Their voluntary self-devotion, which is so common among them. They consider themselves to be all brothers from the moment they are converted. And all this they take quite on faith. They despise worldly goods alike. They regard them merely as common property. It practices the beliefs, the faith of the early Christians, seeking, welcoming death as opposing to going against their true beliefs. None of this is to be taken on faith. These are historical documents we're looking at. None of them have the slightest incentive to promote Christianity. This is such powerful testimony. The last one in particular mocks early Christians, a guy named Lucian, a Greek writer. But in his mocking of Christianity, he gives us valuable insight as to what they truly believe. Okay? One last thing. Dr. Dre, if you want to speak to what it truly meant for a first century Jew to leave their faith and go to Christianity.
It's a rhetorical question that you can kind of ask yourself. What would it take for you to convert from Catholicism, Christianity, to something that's completely opposite of your belief system? I mean, what would it take? And just think about it. Could there be anything that would take you from what you believe right now to something completely different? Because that's what this is. And Judaism is based on a very unified concept of God. There is only one God. Very, very strict monotheism. But what's the core of Christianity? It's not really a unified concept of God, because you have God the Father. Jesus now is God the Son. You throw in God the Holy. You got a Trinitarian, right? A Trinitarian concept. Okay, that's completely different. And oh, by the way, the Messiah, this Jesus guy, just suffered a horrific death. But the concept of Messiah at that time was somebody, a king. He was going to come back and take out the Romans and restore Israel and all that kind of stuff. But yet Jesus is being professed as this Messiah who just was crucified in the most brutal way. How does that fit in? Okay, that's not to mention that it's also an ethnic part too. We don't really have this in Catholicism. We want to say that Catholicism is an ethnicity, right? But Judaism, Jews saw themselves as an ethnic culture. There's something unique. There's something about Judaism that's different. And all that you just throw away because of this. That'd be tough. That'd be tough. Okay, so there has to be something more than just a lie, than just a conspiracy, than just this swoon theory to convert all these people. Because there's massive numbers of people, of Jews converting to Christianity. That's what worried the Jews. That's why they sent Saul out to say, okay, you got to stop this. Why would Saul converse to Christianity, right? Why? Because of the appearance, the resurrection. Okay, so it's more than just saying, they just changed their minds. You just don't change your mind when it comes to that. Okay? I think we're good.
Thank you so much for coming here. We appreciate it.